from here going to India, people from here going to Egypt. But there's no reason why, just like India did, they set up their own institutions, right? Whether it's Deoband or Aligarh or Nadwa or whatever you have, they set up their own institutions and they have a massive impact. There's no reason why intelligent people, like-minded people, open-minded people can't be setting up things here and bringing in teachers who are open-minded, right? And then what you'd have is that you'd have graduates from here who might be sponsored by your communities studying here, right? If they need to go abroad for some Arabic, you can build that in, right? Then they can come back and they can be taught by people that you've employed to maybe to come from even abroad for the initial stage. And then you've made your own graduates, and then those graduates take over the teaching positions. But that's a long-term view, I think. And I think that will have, what we're all talking about is how do we change this? And it's all about mindset, right? It's all about mindset. How do you change people's mindsets? When somebody's been taught for 10 to 15 years that your madhab is the correct madhab, there's only one opinion, right? It's difficult to change that. I'm not saying it's impossible. So what you've got to look at, if we're talking in terms of long-term strategy, and I think that's what there's a medium, there's a short-term, and there's a long-term. The long-term strategy for any region of the world, I think, has to be, and there are efforts in the UK to do that, from where I am, to set up indigenous 6-year programs, 7-year programs, and maybe in a few years' time, they'll become more successful, So I think that's one proposition that needs to be thought about. That takes a lot of effort. It's a 10, 20, 30-year effort. It needs money, it needs dedication, but the fruits might last for 100 to 200, 300 years, as they have in India, right? As they have in India. Just very quickly, I wanted to mention a couple of points that people were mentioning. The point you mentioned about priorities. Imam Hassan al-Banna once came to a mosque and they were fighting. And one group was saying 20 rak'ah, and the other group was saying no, 8 rak'ah. This was in Ramadan for Taraweeh. So they saw the Imam come in and said, "Yeah, Imam, what's your position? Tell us, what do you think? Is it 8 or 20? He said, "My position is that you all go home, right? Pack your bags, go home, because 8 and 20 are sunnah, and unity is fard, right? And unity is fard to such a degree that when Musa came from the mountain and the Banu Israel had worshipped a calf, this is shirk. And he took the head and he said, "Afa asayta amri?" Have you, of his brother Harun, who he placed in charge of the Banu Israel, said, "Have you disobeyed what I told you to do?" And he shook his head. The Quran says he took his head and he took his beard and he shook it like this. He became really angry. Ghadbana asifa, the Quran says. He came down angry. And then he said, "Ya yabna," I don't know the verse fully, but, "Oh, the son of my mother," right? "Don't take my beard and my head. I feared that you may say that I split the Banu Israel. I disunited them." And then he let go. Then he calmed down. So you can see that even in the fard, there are levels. The salah is the imaduddin. This is the pillar of the religion. It's not the same as maybe a lower fard. Even amongst the fard, there are levels, and unity is certainly one of the highest levels. And just to come to what the sister was saying at the back about women, I think that when it comes to women issues, women should be asking for their rights as well, but very important. But I think what needs to happen is that men need to step up as well, right? Men need to, you see, I'll tell you what it is. If a woman says it, then everyone's going to say it's just a woman asking for it, right? But if I said it, then the men take it a bit more seriously, right? So the men should be fighting for women's rights, and the women should be fighting for the men's rights. That's how it should happen, right? It should be the other way around, because we shouldn't be fighting for our own rights. I mean, we can, but this is the Western way. The Western way is to fight for your own rights. I think the Islamic way is to fight for the rights of other people. So we should be saying that women need a space. Women need a right. Women have a voice. And I should be saying it. The men in this room should be saying it. You shouldn't leave it to the women to have to say and argue in their own homes. That's wrong. That's not right. Right? That's what kind of men are we anyway if we do that. So, and I also think, just to comment on the sister there, that to agree with the professor here, that I think what we need to be careful is creating a clerical class or close to a clerical class. We don't have a clerical class in our religion. Scholars are not intermediaries between us and God. What scholars are experts, that's it. They're consultants. They are consultants. They give fatwa, and a fatwa is a consultation. You can take it or you can leave it. And you can go to another scholar and say, I want your consultation now. They are like lawyers, they are like accountants, they are like solicitors in the field of Islam. We need experts. We respect them like we respect doctors. We respect them but we don't want to create a clerical class such that you can't even think without them. That you can't think with them. And I tell often people in my activities in England, you're involved in an Islamic society in the university, and they start to ask you about every single matter. I said, look, you know better what your situation is than I do. I don't know the subtleties and the intricacies and the dynamics of your own society. Yes, if it comes to a fiqh issue, I might be able to help, but don't ask me, how you should set up the chairs, or on what day of the week. You decide. Don't come to me for everything. So teachers need to, I agree, teachers need to empower people. And our job shouldn't be to make people dependent on us. There's no clerical class. There is no clerical class. So I think this is another important thing to bear in mind for everybody, inshallah.
I think we have just like 15 more minutes. What I would like to do is to ask, the panel here. We have been talking about, problems and what are causing the differences. Perhaps if we could spend a few minutes talking about, yes, we have the differences, but I think equally what's important is how we go about handling the differences. In other words, the ethics, how do we behave, towards one another, and how do we promote, that the right kind of behavior, with and among people. Because at the end of the day, we do not, while we may have differences, we do not want to allow how we go about dealing with the differences to be yet another problem, that continues to divide us, separate our hearts and how we work together. So, yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. It's just a comment. Earlier on, Sheikh Rahim had mentioned that there are several types of differences. Some that are allowed and some that are not allowed. So I just wondering if perhaps we could identify those first before we look at how to address the differences. Because in our minds, generally, and definitely in the case of Jamaica, when we think of differences, we're definitely talking about the more costly ones, the ones that lead to other sins and backbiting and harsh divisions among the Jamaat. But of course, there are some differences, as you mentioned, you could just explain what they are, that are also allowed.
If we may just touch on the two main areas, if you want. There are differences generally that the scholars have not allowed in Islam. If you go back even to the earliest days, when the Khawarij, they split away from the mainstream Islam. This was not tolerated by the Sahaba, Ridwanullahi alayhim. And Ali radiallahu anh, he dealt with them very seriously. And he sent Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma to speak to them, eventually even debate with them. And through that, many of them returned to Islam. But he dealt with them very seriously because in certain areas, things which are accepted across the board and are known that this, for example, the main things that we believe, where it concerns our belief, these things generally differences are not allowed in them. So the scholars say what is known to everyone, or what may be called ma'lumun min ad-din bid-darura, what is known instinctively to people, and anyone who reads the Quran and reads the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he knows this, and this is the truth, the way it's supposed to be. Then when people differ in these things, it's not allowed. So that's why you have deviant sects, for example, that the scholars have not allowed. So these differences in these areas in which we are supposed to, for example, there is ijma' among the scholars about them, then we are not allowed to differ from that, from the ijma'. And ijma' means the consensus of the scholars. Alright, so this is one area. Where there is ijma', we are not allowed to have differences. When it comes to the other area of where we are allowed to have differences, this is where we have all of the masail, what we call ijtihadiyya. All of the issues which are based on ijtihad of the scholars, and so they have different ways of looking at them and understanding them. And we know so many of the different issues in our everyday life. Sheikh mentioned some of them. All right. These issues in which there is ijtihad among the scholars and they have differed as a result of that, then here we have to respect the differences. All right. So then we come to that point about how to approach and perhaps solutions to dealing with differences as they are. Then the main point here is to what the scholars say or call adabul ikhtilaf. It's to learn how to have adab in dealing with differences. And I was about to say that when we deal with non-Muslims, our friends who may be non-Muslims, we treat them in the most cordial way. And we take their feelings into consideration, and we go so much out of our way to to make things good with them. But then when we deal with our own Muslim brothers and sisters, but because we have a little difference of opinion, the difference between a non-Muslim and a Muslim is huge where it concerns our belief and our aqeedah and so on. All right? But when it comes to our Muslim brothers and sisters and we differ in small issues, we make that the reason for enmity and for hatred. And this is absolutely unacceptable.